you tonight, right?
Yep.
So Diane is here. She signed up. It is
Good, how about you?
non-agenda-related. I
I'm glad to see you're back, walking on 2 feet and all that.
Agenda-related. Oh, before her. Usually
Before
we
her.
do
Wonderful place to be
email
when
her.
you're sick, but it is when you're working. Get on your way.
Holcomb, oh,
I
okay.
think.
Oh, this is the blonde back there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I've
Or
talked
if
to
you want
her.
to say Joe,
yeah.
that's fine.
All right,
Okay.
sounds good.
Believe how fast you can see some-
Remember, you did it last month.
Good evening.
Left it to me, but next
Linda,
month,
could you please give the invocation?
used to do it. It rotates every 8 months we get stuck.
Okay,
the Beyond
let's bow our
2019.
heads. Oop. Okay. Let's bow our heads.
did we take
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth in this meeting tonight as it is in heaven. Supply all needs that need to be met here tonight. Forgive us for words and actions that have been spoken or used against each other that will not bring about your purposes or bring about a good outcome, as we forgive those who have spoken words or actions against us. Let us not be tempted to do that which is not right in your sight. Deliver us from influences that do not promote unity, love, righteousness, peace, and justice. Deliver us from evil. For this city is yours. These people are yours. And your plans for us are for good and not for evil, to prosper us and give us a future and a hope. Holy Spirit, move among us as decisions are made, so that your kingdom purposes for this city are established. In your holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Linda. Now we'll officially call this committee of the whole meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Please, sorry about that. I did print this out for you if you want, if you need the motions.
Okay.
Mayor Miller,
Here.
Alderpersons Clem,
Here.
Monroe,
Here.
Simmons,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Stacy,
Here.
Shadle is absent, Sanders is absent, as is Sellers.
Thank you. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Alderman Parker.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Alderman Parker, the meeting's yours.
Okay. Could you take roll call, please?
No, we already did that.
Oh, all right.
Item number 4.
Number 4. Oh, I guess we're way down there. Okay, we need approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Yep. Clem and Simmons for first and second. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. What? We'll need to vote on it? Oh, anyone opposed? Okay, now we need the approval of the minutes from the committee of a whole meeting held on June 12th, 2023.
So move. Second.
Clem and Monroe. Anybody opposed? Or everybody in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Okay, public comments. We have this on agenda items only, and I have nobody on the list for that. Okay, presentation of Valor Awards.
Yes, there is.
Sir? Oh, she's not agenda related. She's on the list for after the meeting, so thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation of Valor Awards to 3 police officers presented by Chief Schinberger.
Hang on one second. I'm sorry. Lovey, did you have written correspondence or no?
Non.
Oh, non-agenda.
Good evening. Tonight I want to take this opportunity to recognize courageous acts of service conducted by Corporal Devin Truckenmiller and Patrolman Daniel Moore, as well as Patrolman Matthew Junius, during a call for service that occurred shortly after midnight on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. So this award of valor is the highest level of recognition awarded by the Freeport Police Department. It's not something that's handed out often. And to receive the Award of Valor, the officer must have demonstrated actions of bravery above and beyond the call of duty. So on that night, Freeport police officers were dispatched to a residence for an in-progress domestic disturbance. When Patrolman Moore arrived, he observed a male and female physically fighting in the driveway of the residence. The male then forced the female into a vehicle that was parked in the driveway. While Patrolman Moore was running to the vehicle, he was attacked by a pit bull dog. The pit bull jumped at Patrolman Moore and bit his outer vest carrier, causing it to open up. Patrolman Moore was eventually able to get the pit bull secured with the assistance of another individual. Patrolman Moore then approached the vehicle and now observed the male and female inside of it. The female was being held down against the vehicle's rear passenger floorboard. The male was actively strangling the female with both his hands and had his entire body weight pressing down on the female's neck. Patrolman Moore could visibly tell the female was struggling and unable to breathe. Corporal Truckenmiller arrived to assist Patrolman Moore, and they were able to remove the male from the female. When Patrolman Junius showed up on scene, the male refused to cooperate with officers who were trying to place him under arrest, so they had to utilize control tactics to gain control of the male. The male then tried to bite officers while they're trying to gain control, and all three sustained injuries during their attempt to place the male under arrest. The male was eventually restrained and subsequently taken to the Stevenson County Jail. During their investigation, officers learned that the male had threatened to kill the female. It would not stop choking her even after the officers arrived on scene. So after I reviewed all this, it was my belief that Corporal Truckenmiller, Patrolman Moore, and Patrolman Junius, who's not with us tonight, were worthy of receiving the Award of Valor for actions of bravery above and beyond the call of duty.
Okay, number 8, discussion regarding ordinance amending chapter 806, alcoholic liquor sales, section 806.04 D2, supplemental video gambling, placing a cap on the number of video game licenses presented by Alderman Clem and Sellers.
Alderman Parker, if I could, I'd like to make a motion to move that to the August cow. Since we've got a full agenda tonight and we haven't done a lot of research and stuff, we're still working on it, so I'd like to move it forward if we could.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Second from Clem and Stacy? Or Simmons, I'm sorry, I'll get it straight here. Yeah, it's payback. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, number 9 is training regarding boardsmanship and parliamentary procedure, presented by Nancy Sylvester from, what college? Oh, Rock Valley College. Your turn.
Okay, thank you.
Last May, can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. last May, I received a call from Rob, and he and I guess under advice of the attorney, had talked about having so many new people on council. And so his recommendation the recommendation that he had received was that we have a presentation on boardsmanship and parliamentary procedure. And thus, that's how we got to where we are tonight. So that's what I'm going to do. If you have questions as we go through it, please don't hesitate to ask. If there are clarification questions especially, and otherwise if we have time at the end, I'll see if you have any other questions that you may have. Anybody having any trouble hearing me? Nope. Okay, I have one of those voices that carries a little more than I'd like sometimes. So today we're going to talk about boardsmanship, being a member of a board, and what I have found is that boardsmanship in this country is much like parenting. We figure if you know how to become one, you know how to become a good one. And if you've ever been to a grocery store on Saturday morning, you know that the first one of those two is not true. So it's a matter of a skill, information, understanding what your role is. And that's what we'll talk about tonight. And then we'll also talk about parliamentary procedure. And that is the running of the meeting and following the rules that are in your parliamentary authority. So let's begin with board basics. And we're going to talk about board basics, and then we're going to talk about board governing documents. You have many governing documents. It's important to understand what they are, as well as to understand what the order is of priority of them. We're going to talk about your fiduciary duty, a duty which is a legal duty, and it's a very important duty for you to understand. We're going to talk about board-staff relationship. What I have found many times is staff members don't understand what is the proper board-staff relationship, and many times board members don't either, and it causes problems for the organization. So I'm going to be clarifying that. So let's start with, and you have a handout in front of you, and I have a lot of information on the handout. And so with the idea that you may want to, does everybody find their handout? I want to make sure that you know, if you need to make notes on it, whatever, it's there for you to have a real understanding of what we're talking about. So let's talk about board basics. When you sit at this table of the organization, who is the ownership of this organization? That's a question I was hoping you'd maybe answer for me. Who is the ownership? You're here representing them. Who is the ownership?
People, citizens.
The citizens of Freeport. Yours is pretty clear. Citizens of Freeport. Now, it's not just your next door neighbor or the guy behind you that always comes and bends your ear. It's all of them. The quiet ones as well as the very vocal ones that are the ownership. It's not so easy for some organizations to figure out their owner. Let me give you an example that you would be familiar with. United Way. Who's the owner of United Way? Well, it could be the organizations that they donate the money to. It could be the people who donate. It could be the people who receive the services. You see how it's not as clear. I've done a few United Way boards, and those are the answers I get. And from the same board. So one is thinking they're representing one, another thinking they're representing the other. And what we have to realize is when we sit here, we are here to represent the totality of the ownership. You have authority as a board member, but only when acting as a group. Unless this board gives you a particular authority, or in the case of the mayor or the city manager, in case the rules give you some authority, a particular authority, you don't have that authority. And that's one thing over the years I found that a lot of board members don't understand. I'm on the board, I got the board authority. No, you only have that authority when you're at this table acting as a group. Focus should be on values. If you have a strategic plan, it's probably based on values. If you have other documents, they many times are based on values. And so we need to be making decisions based on the values that we've decided as a group is the important thing. Your job is to oversee the city manager. You hire, you give his review, you fire if that were the case. That's your job, is to oversee the city manager. There's a whole list of rules you have to follow. You have to follow the rules by government, and I'm going to give you a list of a bunch of those, but there are many rules that you need to follow. You need to follow the rules set by the ownership, the taxpayers. Every now and then, they come up with something that they vote on, and it affects you, and you have to follow those. And then the board themselves comes up with your own rules. So you need to follow those rules as well. Another board basic is the importance of diversity. And when I talk about diversity, I not just mean in gender or in race or in religious background, but I also mean in skills. It's very important to look at the skill sets that you have. For example, when I was on the nominating committee with the Rockford Chamber of Commerce, what we did was we put together a chart of what are the skills that we'd like to have on this board. And then we looked at who fit in there. And when we found that nobody on the board currently fit in one of those skills that we thought was important, then that's where we went to look for people. A personal example, my husband of 48 years, who passed away 3 years ago, my husband was an accountant by training. So I never felt like I needed to pay much attention to the accounting stuff because I knew he would. And now, anytime I'm on a board, I make sure somebody on that board knows about accounting so that if I have a question that deals with their field, I can ask them about it. So board diversity is very important. And I know you don't get to choose who's on your board, but you do get the opportunity to encourage people to run for the board. Board meetings should be efficient. You don't do committee work, and that's one of the problems that a lot of board members have, because many times you get on a board because you got on a committee and you did a phenomenal job and people encouraged you to get on the board. And you forget that this is a whole different kind of responsibility and that you need to not do committee work. The presiding officer should be facilitating the meeting, not dictating. Motions are needed for board action. If you as a board have not passed a motion on a particular issue, then that isn't the rules. That isn't in your rules. That is not something you have to follow or that others have to follow. If you want something that people follow, you've got to have a motion passed on it. And of course, social time is much better later in the meeting, not during the meeting. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about the issue that I personally have found to be the issue that most board members don't understand, and that is the role of the board. And if you would bear with me, you may roll your eyes, and that's okay with me if you do, I understand, but I'd like for you to do an activity with me. So would all of you sitting at the table and the desk up there come to the middle of the room, the center in here for me, please. That's all of you. Yeah, all of you.
Nobody's coming. Yeah, come on up. Want me to come up? Yes.
Like I said, if you roll your eyes as I get these out, I'm okay with that. You want to make sure you have a little bit of room around you. You think? No, I got more. No. Life's not that easy. There you go. You don't have one. You don't have one yet. Okay, well, like I said, I have plenty over here. Now you need to spread out a little so there is some room for you because you're going to need a little bit of room. So yeah, you can spread out back in these areas a little bit.
She's leaving, eh?
You cannot go out the door. You're not allowed. Okay, here's the activity that I'd like you to do. I would like for you to balance this dowel rod on the tip of your finger. So get it ready. Balance the dowel rod on the tip of your finger. And I would like for you not to take your eyes off of the tip of your finger.
Oh.
Get your eyes way down there at the tip of the finger and balance that dowel rod on it.
I can't.
How are you doing? What? Was he or is he lying? That's what I thought. Okay, now what I want you to do is to balance the dowel rod on your finger again, but this time I want you to look at the other end of the stick. Balance it on the other end of the stick. You can move around if you need to. Keep your eye on the other end of the stick.
He used to be in the circus.
Were you a clown in the circus? Yes. I did, didn't I? Everybody needs a clown. How did you do?
Better.
I think Ms. Stacy did awesome.
I was noticing that. She's getting really good. And he's really loving it. Here's the message. This dowel rod is the city of Freeport. And if everybody is down here looking at the day-to-day, how much did we spend on that? How much is in this? Do we need this? everybody that's involved with the city is looking down here, what happens to the city? It doesn't make it, does it? It doesn't succeed. Somebody involved in the city of Freeport, taking care of this dowel rod, must be focused on the other end of the stick. What's the other end of the stick? The other end of the stick is 3 years out, 4 years out. It's not yesterday, and it's not how much did we spend on. It's your job, when you sit at this table, to be thinking about 2, 3 years out. When I came in, I met you, and you're with the library, right? You're the library administrator.
Yes.
Okay. The example I'm going to use, she can testify to, I'm sure. Years ago, I taught at Rock Valley College for 31 years. Years ago, there were no computers anywhere, and then they started, and then the library was expected to be the answer to the digital divide. You know, the digital divide between those who have computers and those who don't. And if the library board was down here paying attention to what are we spending right now, why are we, instead of, oh my gosh, they're going to expect us to be the ones to do the computers. That's what all the trends are saying. If they weren't looking there, they surely didn't get prepared. Somebody in this has to take care of the city by looking at 3 to 5 years. And that, my friends, is your job. Make sense? Yes. Dalrod's not quite so silly, is it? I was, years and years ago, I was sitting at my desk trying to figure out how to communicate this. And I used a pencil. And then I showed my husband, and he said, why don't you use a dowel rod? And I said, what is a dowel rod? So now I own a whole bunch of them. So I'll take them back, and I want you to remember the visual. When you're sitting at this table, it's not tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, and it sure to heck is not yesterday. It's your job is to look at where are we going in 3 to 5 years. What do we need to do today to position ourselves so that in 3 to 5 years we're not going, oh my God, they expect us to buy all these computers and we hardly have enough money to buy the books. You don't want to be in that position. But that's not other people's job, that's yours. And it's the toughest, because you've got to make sure that you look down the road. You also have to make sure that you make sure staff helps you do that. Staff helps you know, oh, there's this great article on such and such. That kind of thing. Because you've got to be looking 3 to 5 years, not today, and definitely not yesterday. Any questions about that? Does it make sense?
Sure does.
So when you start asking you, now you've all done this together. When someone in the group starts asking questions down here, what you might do is just nudge them and say, return to the sticker here. I've given you a socially acceptable way to help each other remember that we're supposed to be looking when we're sitting here at the big picture. Any comments on that or questions? No? Let's talk some more about the role of the board. you have two roles. One is governance, and the other is support. Now, if you think about it, those are very different roles. In the governance role, you're the boss. There are some things that cannot happen if you all don't decide that they will. So you're the boss. You sit at this table to protect the public interest, the taxpayer's interest. That's your job. You select, oversee, and review the city manager, but you do not micromanage. You don't look at the other end of the stick. It's very important that you keep that in mind. You also, though, have a second role, and that is support. You bring in maybe contracts or clout or help with something. You provide skills that maybe aren't here and that you can share and use. You are an ambassador to the community and to those who come to your community. The problem is you've got to balance those two roles. You have to be the one who asks all the tough questions. And at the same time, you have to be the cheerleader. So you see that diversity in your role. It's hard, but those two are together are your roles. Ask the tough questions. I left my phone at home and forgot that this silly thing, well, I won't do it now. I can't speak. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Any comments or questions about the board's role? The question that you've got to answer is, where does the role of the board end and the role of the staff begin? And many times when I work with boards, I don't find that clarity. So work hard to have that clarity. Don, do you have a comment?
No.
Oh, you look like you did. I'm sorry. Sorry. Any questions or comments before we move on about the role of the board? Does it make sense, what we've talked about? At all?
Does make sense.
Making
Good idea,
sense?
yes.
Okay, good. And you can see, if you think about it, how a lot of board people don't have a clue of looking at the future. They're looking at the details and asking detailed questions instead of looking at where we're going. There's a whole list of rules. Like everything else and every other job we have in life, there's a whole list of rules we have to follow. And what I'd like to share with you is that list and the hierarchy of that list. Federal laws, you have a lot of federal laws that you have to, that apply to you. One, for example, is the IRS code, because it applies to everybody in every kind of organization. You then have state statutes. And there are state statutes about what cities can do, what cities can't do, how you have to do certain things. There are also, not in your world, but I wanted to, a lot of times when people find out you've done some training on boardsmanship or on parliamentary procedure, they ask you questions about it. And so I'm throwing in a couple of times things that are not applicable to you, but are applicable to, like, the nonprofits. and nonprofits would all have an articles of incorporation. Then comes your bylaws, followed by standing rules, and then, and only then, you have your parliamentary authority. This is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. This, sorry, coordination is my strong suit. This is the 12th edition, and if you have a copy of Robert's that looks like anything but this, you don't have an up-to-date copy. And the rules say the current edition of Robert's, and this is the current edition. The problem is you go to the bookstore to buy a copy of Robert's, and there's a whole long shelf, and most of them are a third, a fourth the size of this guy, so they become real appealing. Well, most of those, or many of those, are so old that they're no longer covered by copyright. So if you picked up 4 or 5 of them, you would find the same information on the same page. So this is the one that is the current edition. I wanted to share with you some other books that, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. But I wanted to make sure I got to the parliamentary authority. And we'll talk about some other books here when we get to parliamentary procedure. I'd like to now talk about your fiduciary duty. And your fiduciary duty is, many times people think, well, the fiduciary duty is simply we take care of the money. We do a good job at taking care of the money. Well, your legal fiduciary duty is much more detailed than that. Your fiduciary duty has 3 separate legal duties. One is the duty of loyalty. The second is the duty of care. And the third is the duty of obedience, also called fidelity of purpose. Let's talk about each of those duties because you are legally responsible for these. And when board members don't do their job or boards don't do their job, this is many times the avenue that people use to file charges or to file lawsuits against them. The duty of loyalty is you must not compete. You find out something at this meeting, and you think, ooh, my business could profit from that if I... Can't do that. That is not being loyal to the city. And when you're sitting at this table, that's who you need to be loyal to. You need to make sure that you make clear to everyone their conflict of interest. If you have a conflict of interest on any issue, you should not be voting on it, and you should be stating that conflict of interest so everyone is aware of that. You must not usurp the city's opportunities. So you find out there's an opportunity coming and your company and you jump in and, no, can't do that. You've got to, again, be loyal to the city with any information that you get sitting at this table. And the duty of self-dealing. Maybe you got a kid who needs a job and they have a job opening, and so you could try to use your position. You've never known anybody who did that, but just might. It is something we have to be very, very careful of. Because remember, we have when you're sitting at this table and when you're representing this organization, the city, you have the duty of loyalty. You have another duty, and frankly, I think this is, of all 3 of the duties, the most violated of all 3 of them. And that is the duty of care. You must exercise independent judgment. It's not 4 of your friends called you, you were going to do AA, going to vote yes, and 4 of your friends called you, and you didn't want to piss them off, so you vote no. You can't do that. You've got to exercise independent judgment. You must stay reasonably informed. Let me tell you my interpretation of that. When you receive a packet in advance, and there's information, or let me give you, because I think some of you are old enough that you might remember how this is. Used to sit at board meetings back in the days when we got our board packets in the mail. Some of you can remember before we got them electronically, we got them in the mail. And you would go to a board meeting and you would find some of the board members pick up a pen and use it as if it were a letter opener. And they're opening the board packet that they got 5 or 6 days ago. That is what staying reasonably informed is not. If you're not coming to the meeting, having read the homework you're supposed to, then you're not staying reasonably informed. You need to attend meetings regularly. And when I say attend meetings, I mean you need to be not playing with your phone, not playing with your computer, not doing other distractions. You need to be paying attention to the meeting because that is your duty of care. You need to participate in decisions. If you don't have a good reason to abstain, like we're voting on something that my son has some interest in or has, works with that company or whatever it might be. If you don't have a good reason, your responsibility is to be making decisions. And so you should be voting on issues, which means sometimes you have to take a hard stand. But I hope nobody ever told you being a city council person is an easy job, because it's not. It's one that you really have to follow these duties. And there are some other things that you must refrain from. You must refrain, and they're listed in your handout, but let me just give them to you. Grossly negligent conduct, reckless conduct, intentional misconduct, and knowingly violating the law. So those are the things that you need to make sure that you refrain from. Now let's talk about the third duty. Third fiduciary duty, legal duty, is the duty of obedience, fidelity of purpose. So the duty of obedience means that you, when you sit here, are faithful to the purpose of this organization. Purpose of this organization. Law compliance obligations, there are many of them. Withholding tax requirements, civil rights laws, state solicitation laws, equal rights laws, and that's just a very short list of what they are. The business judgment rule is that if you make a decision well-informed, in good faith, and in the best interest of the organization, that a lawsuit against you would not be successful. So that's why these duties are so very important. Any questions about fiduciary responsibility or comments? It's very important because that is the basis many times of lawsuits to people or to the group. I'd like to now talk about board-staff relationship and try to figure out a good way to visually show board-staff relationship, kind of like the same way I did with the dowel rod. And the best thing that I know of is an hourglass. So if we look at the hourglass, now remember, an hourglass goes either way. So I'm going to show it to you one way, but it can be tilted the other way just as equal. At the very top are you, the city council, when you're acting together as a group. Then, in that more narrow part, is the mayor. And then in the other, coming through the middle, and where it's again still pretty narrow, is the city manager. And then is the staff. What does that hourglass tell you? If you want to tell a staff member to do something, you've got to go through the middle of that hourglass. You don't walk in to a staff member and tell them to do something that you haven't first checked with, this, like if city council, check with the mayor, ask the mayor to check it out with the city manager, and then the city manager to communicate it to the staff person. But you can't just walk, they're not your staff, is what I'm gently trying to say. They are the staff of the city, and for you to get to them, you've got to go through the hourglass. Now let's turn the hourglass the other way. Let's say a staff member comes up to you as a city councilman and starts talking your ear off about something that they think you should be doing and that they really would like for you to do it, and you should real quick say that phrase that's not around much anymore, but that was around a long time ago: talk to the hand, because I'm not listening. Because they haven't gone through the hourglass. Because if the staff wants to communicate something to one of you, ask one of you to do something or whatever, that's got to go first to the city manager, then from the city manager to the mayor, and then to the staff. Because the staff reports to the city manager, and you all go through the mayor. Does the hourglass make sense? It's amazing how easy it is. And I will confess, years and years ago when I was on the Rockford Chamber of Commerce Board, a staff member and I were talking, and we diverted into some things that having to do with work. And I listened, and I later thought, I shouldn't have. I should have stopped that. Because that's not the communication channel that we must follow. If we're going to be a responsible board, that's not the communication channel. The hourglass is the communication channel. It's hard. Yes?
Does it make a difference if the mayor is part-time?
No, it doesn't. Because the mayor is still the person who, you're part-time too. So, yeah, you just hope your part-time can kind of work together. Or if it's urgent, you maybe find a way to communicate something urgent. But no, it doesn't. Any other questions or comments? Have you seen this violated?
I do it all the time. I think Rob is so accessible. It's just easy to shoot
Can you
him a
speak a
text.
little bit louder? I don't think everybody can hear you.
I said, I do it all of the time. I think Rob is very accessible, and he's very open to me shooting him a text, so I do that. I didn't realize that it should have to go through Joe or the mayor first. You know,
You're doing it correctly.
Well,
No,
and, you know, if you're talking
It's
to him
extra
about
stuff.
a game that's coming up this weekend, a sport or whatever, shoot him a text. But if you're talking about anything that has to do with the city and asking him to do something, that should go through the mayor. Because the mayor is the one who's in charge of the big city, of that big picture, and should be the one that you should be talking to. Yes, comment?
And I just want, so obviously we're a city manager form of government, and Nancy, obviously, I know you give these presentations to all forms of, government here in the state of Illinois there, whether they're mayor, council members like here, but trustee, village president forms and stuff like that. So Freeport is a very specific, city manager form
Yes.
of government.
I'm very much aware of that,
Okay.
yes.
So, most of the chain of command here, though, as far as it's almost like city council / mayor is probably more appropriate for Freeport as far as your diagram goes. And then, but the city manager has full control of the day-to-day operations of it.
Yeah,
and not
that's
necessarily-
right.
Not necessarily through the mayor always. There might,
No, but what I'm saying is if the council wants to give, they do not have any authority over the city manager.
We have total authority.
You have
Works for us.
authority over the city manager when you're sitting at this table.
Exactly.
You don't have it when you're individual. As a group, sitting at this table, you can give, but I'm talking about when you're individually talking.
okay, fair enough.
Not what you can tell them through your actions as a group.
Understand.
But does that make it clearer?
Thank you for drawing that distinction.
Okay, thank you for asking that question. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, when I say city council, I should have made it clear. I don't mean the whole group. I mean you as an individual cannot, as a city council member, cannot go to the city manager and tell them to do something unless this body has told you it's okay to do that, or unless you're on a specific project and the mayor has said, go ahead and go talk to him directly. Those are the only times. Yes,
We're told so long as there's,
I need you there.
we're told that so long as there's two, it can become an agenda on,
It can
it can be
become.
an item on the agenda.
That's right. That's right. I'm talking, though, about individually not doing something here at a meeting. But if you go into the city manager's office and say, community, I have an idea of a project on community development, and I'd like to see you do that. And here's the idea, and here's what you need to do. That's not your role, because you as an individual are not the city managers. You do not have authority as an individual over the city manager. Is that making sense? Does that make sense to you?
Not to me.
You can still go on and ask,
So
but
then
get to the
does
microphone so they can hear.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So then does the city manager have the authority to say what we're gonna do on a project? We are gonna,
It only has to do, what I'm talking about is not something that you as a group would decide necessarily. But what oh wow, I don't know where I got to there. Hold on just a minute. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. What I'm talking about is if you decide that it would be a good idea that community development did X, Y, Z, or there's somebody in community, I just keep picking on you, sorry. It's because of, If you decide that there's a particular staff member of his that you would like to have do something for you as a councilwoman, that is not something you can go to his staff and have them do. Is that what you understand, or is that different than what you understood?
It's making sense.
Okay. Yes.
I think just to kind of help the council with that, which has kind of been, I think expressed before, is that I think where Nancy is going with this is that you guys act as a council, you guys act as a group,
Right.
and that's how you guys make decisions as far as marching orders. If one of you, let's say hypothetically, I'm going to pick on Alderman Clem, were to say just by himself and says, you know what, I think an ice cream social would be wonderful, hasn't talked it over, has not come before the council whatsoever, and he just goes and says, Rob, I want you to organize and implement a ice cream social and go ahead and spend whatever amount of money you think is proper. Alderman Clem by himself doesn't have the authority to go to Rob and make that decision. He has to bring that council has to make that decision as a whole. And Nancy, am I kind of?
That is exactly right. And if you want one of Rob's employees to type up your minutes from a committee meeting or to do something, you need to go through these channels. Does that make more sense? Okay. You individually, you have no authority. You only have authority unless this group gives it to you. So if they say, Don, we want you to take over this particular project, and you go on and communicate with the city manager as you go through that, and then you start working on the project, and the city manager says, you know, you and one of his staff members have got this worked out pretty well. Don, why don't you just go to her directly? But you don't do that without city manager telling you that and without the board telling you to move forward with it. Is that making sense? Yes. Okay. Yes.
But we should really be going to the mayor.
Yes. Yes. Unless this body has said, like I used in that example, unless this body passed something to have Don to be the one to do that. And then we've done it, and the mayor's been a part of that decision.
Can you repeat what you just said? I couldn't hear you. You weren't close enough to the mic.
I said that we have to go to the mayor. What did I say?
If the council, if you're acting as an individual and you want something done by staff, you have to go through those channels. That's what I'm saying. If you're acting as a group, then you have the authority as a group. There's there's a lot of authority you have at this table. You just don't have much individually, unless it's given to you by this group. This is a major problem in many, many communities. Done lots and lots of cities, and this is a major problem. Council members walk into, in this case, one of Rob's staff members and says, I need you to do such and such, and they're like, whatever you say. Or they go in and say, have you heard the stories about Rob? You should hear. You want me to tell him? And your answer is no. That's not. They should be going through the proper channels, and a staff member going to a city council member is not a proper channel. Okay. Is it beginning to make sense? Sure, as long as you speak loud enough that they can hear.
No, we don't have audience participation.
Okay. I'm sorry. No, that's okay. I'm sorry. I'll be around afterwards. You see, my coordination, like I told you, is my strong suit. Okay, are we clear on this one? It's a tough one, but I'm telling you, it is so important because I've seen it do really bad things for organizations.
I don't know
Yes.
if this is appropriate to ask or not. There's and it might not be an issue, and I don't want it to be an issue. There's one alderman that is, there's a meeting coming up soon, and the event is led by a few outside organizations, and my understanding by the posting is that there's one alderman that's kind of leading the charge, kind of the spokesperson. Is that acceptable? Because that person's operating individually, not as the group.
He or she, that alderman, should not be doing anything with being as an alderman. If they want to do something as a citizen and not in the position to get what they want, that's what we have to be careful about. Did that answer? I don't think it answered. Keep going, if I didn't. Yeah, I mean, and it's a thin line. It's hard. It's a hard thing. Because, you know, a lot of people try to use their position as alderman, whatever position, as board member, in whatever organization. Donna's got comment.
She's got a comment here. She does.
Oh,
So that's very limiting. So
a little louder.
I feel that's limiting. So as third ward alderman, I say, I want to have some type of shindig for my ward. You're saying I can't do that?
That's your ward, and you're in charge of that ward.
Right. But
And as I understand it, is there,
It would be like a town hall meeting kind of thing, and led by one alderman. I just wasn't sure if it falls under that. I don't know.
if it's for your ward to come together and talk to you about your role, then that you're not going through this. You're not there. What you're describing is you as a city council member.
I was referring to the mayor's question.
Okay.
That there's an organization that may want to do something, and an alderman is leading that charge. So if that is something that the alderperson wants to do as their contribution, like, yes, let's do this in our ward, why would that be a problem? That's where I'm confused, because the question, if I heard it correctly, was if an alderperson is leading a charge with different organizations.
Okay.
Am I
Use
getting
a
words
specific, like
If they're acting as a representative,
anytime you're acting as a representative, it's a different story.
yeah.
If you're there as a representative to a particular organization or a particular group, if you're there as a representative of this body, you can't make that decision to be that.
Okay, if you're saying you're there speaking for the council as a whole, but if I particularly am part of a group, be it the NAACP or whatever, and I decide to go as alderperson and support my ward, that's fine. But if I go trying to speak on behalf of the entire
Ward, there's a particular group that gets together, ABC organization, which does a lot of good raising of funds and stuff, and you go, then as you know, as a member of that ward and as the leader of that ward, you can work with them on that, but you cannot be a spokesman for the city unless you've gone through this group. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that clarified it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Ready to move on? This is a tough one. But it's also one that I've seen really, really, really cause organizations problems. We've looked at board basics and the hierarchy of governing rules. We've looked at the fiduciary duty at that board-staff relationship. What I'd like to, and covered then boardsmanship. And what I'd like to do now is to talk about parliamentary procedure. And I want to make it clear that there's no such thing as a stupid question. when it comes to parliamentary procedure. So if you have a question, this is the time to ask that question. In parliamentary procedure, we're going to cover the purpose. I can't walk away, I forget the microphone. In parliamentary procedure, we're going to cover the purposes of parliamentary procedure. We're also going to cover a quorum, the agenda, order of business, processing a motion, a concept called precedence of motions. And in the parliamentary world, when you see that word, precedence is the proper pronunciation of it. In the non-parliamentary world, most people pronounce it as precedence, but it's in the parliamentary world, it's precedence. Meaning of votes, we'll talk about the script of a motion, what should be in the meeting minutes, and the rules for a small board, as well as a cheat sheet for you as the basic characteristics of a motion. So that's what we're going to talk about now with parliamentary procedure. The current edition of Roberts, as I mentioned earlier, is this edition, the one that is as thick as I showed you that one was. There are some other books. I will, with no shame here, this is a book that I'm the author of. It's The Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rules. Another one that I'm the author of is The Gorilla's Guide to Robert's Rules. There are some others that picking up Roberts and trying to read him without any background in it is difficult. And so I would like to recommend to you 2 books that I think are helpful to at least understand it all and help you understand what's in the bigger book. This one is Parliamentary Procedure, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Parliamentary Procedure Fast Track. Notice it's a smaller book. And this one is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief. And this particular one is written by the same authorship team as this one is. So there's no conflict in them. It's just at an easier to understand level. I know a lot of boards are given a copy of this instead of the full Roberts. But I just wanted you to be aware of that those books are available. What are the purposes of parliamentary procedure? One is to expedite business. If you follow proper parliamentary procedure, then business usually is very expedited, and particularly with very large groups, it is. It's to assure legality. And in our litigious, happy society, that is so very important that we do it all legally. And it's there to protect the rights of the minority. Minority as far as individuals, but minority also having to do with a minority point of view. And to me, this one is so important because almost all of the majority ideas out there started as a minority point of view and grew and grew. And some grew a little bit and then plopped because they didn't have a lot of validity. But those that we're aware of now, most of them grew and grew and grew and grew until they became the majority opinion. So we can't squelch the rights of the minority because they many times, those ideas many times, with a fair hearing, become the majority point of view. So that's why, to me, that's such an important purpose of parliamentary procedure. Let's talk about the word quorum, and that's a term that you've heard a lot, and I just want to make sure that you understand it. It is the number of voting members who must be present for business to be transacted legally. So your quorum is, what's your quorum? Is it a majority? Okay. Your quorum is a majority. So you cannot conduct business without a majority of your voting members present at that meeting. Quorum is many times misunderstood, and they think of it as votes. It's not votes, it's members present, not, it's warm bodies, not votes. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have, you do have a membership of 8 plus the chair. If a quorum was needed was a majority, then that would mean that you would have to have 5 members present. If you have a vote and there are 2 yeses, 1 no, and 2 people abstained, do you have a quorum? Yes, because the 2 that abstained were at the meeting. That's how you know they abstained, because when their name was called, they abstained. But they're still counted as a part of the quorum, even if they're, so remember, warm bodies, not votes. And I always encourage those who are taking the minutes that if they ever had something like that, where the vote was 2 in favor, 1 against, and that's all you put in the minutes, then I would recommend at the end, when, say, the motion was adopted and a quorum was present. So somebody doesn't go back a few years later and go, there were only 3 people there. So therefore, and they needed 5. So therefore, we don't have to worry about following this rule because it wasn't voted by a majority. Yes, it was, even if it got 2 yeses and 1 no. Is that clear on quorum? Okay. Let's talk about agenda, and I'm going to talk about agenda from 2 perspectives. First of all, I want to give you, again, because people, when you get in a position like you're in, people will ask you about different parts of parliamentary procedure. So I want you to know, and in your handout you'll find this, that what Robert says are the agenda items. Robert says you start with approval of the minutes, you go to the report of the officers, followed by any boards, followed by standing committees. Standing committees, think of them as standing around all the time. Those are the ones that are in your rules, are standing committees. Then the next agenda item are reports of special committees. Those are committees that are formed for a specific purpose. They exist until that purpose is completed, and then they cease to exist. So that's a special committee. Standing committees are hanging around all the time because they're in the rules. Then comes special orders, and the most frequent time you'll see special orders is if your rules say, at the first meeting in the month of September, you will do ABC. Then ABC goes under special orders because it's an order from the rules. Think of it as an order coming from your rules. Then comes unfinished business. And please don't call it old business, because people call it old business, and then I think, well, we talked about this a couple times before. I'm going to bring it up here. No. Unfinished business is something that you started at a previous meeting and didn't finish. Most of the time, you postpone it to the next meeting. And then it goes under unfinished business, not old business. And then the last one is new business. So we take care of all of the things that we traditionally need to do in our meeting first before we come up with any new ideas or new business. So that's the agenda according to Roberts. But because of those things we call state statutes, you have a different agenda. Your agenda is, first of all, and you call it, the state statutes refer to it as order of business, and again, this is in your handout. Approval of the agenda, then the reading and approval, amendment and approval of the minutes, followed by public comment on only the ones on agenda items, then the consent agenda, if you have any items there, communication and written reports, ordinance, if there's a second reading, then ordinance, if there's a first reading of one, then come resolutions, followed by reports of your standing committees and reports of select committees, which is another word for special committees, reports of department heads, city manager's report, mayor's report, and then comes new business. So that's these last two slides, this slide and the slide before it, are what the state statutes say are your order of business. Any question on agenda or order of business? Oh, I forgot, the last one there is public comment. And that's public comment on any subject then, followed by adjournment. Any questions on order of business or agenda? Okay. I'd like to talk about how you as a group take an action. And this is extremely important to understand because this is how you have to take an action, how you have to, the process that you use in taking an action according to your parliamentary authority, according to Roberts. The first step is that a voting member of the body that's meeting makes a motion. So it can only be made, a motion in this group can only be made by a voting member of the city council, unless there's a rule somewhere that says anything different than this. This is what Roberts says, okay? Then another voting member seconds the motion. And the principle is at least two of you should want to talk about it before we spend our valuable meeting time on that subject. The third is that the presiding officer states the motion. And that's when you want to make sure that you do. And here's a good part of the explanation of why that one's so important. Think of it when the presiding officer states the motion, that in your case, she goes out and takes from all of you and takes away from the one person who made the motion, and gives it to all of you. In other words, Don, if you made a motion, when we get to step number 3, it no longer belongs to Don. When step number 3 is finished, it no longer belongs to Don. It now belongs to all of us. So if Don, you get part of the way through it and Don goes, I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to take my motion back. It's too late. You have to give him permission. You have to take a majority vote to give permission to take it back. Because Don can't take it back by himself, because remember, she took it from Don and gave it to all of you when she stated that motion. Make sense? Then comes the fourth. Oh, question. Yes, thank you for helping me with that, Don.
So prior to reading of the motion, say I make a motion and I'm like, oh wait, we can rescind our motion. right? As long as it hasn't been read as a motion?
Once the chair,
Before the chair,
once we get past step number 3, it's not yours. So you can't take it back. Once that's been completed, once step number 4, which is the debate, so once the debate begins, it's no longer yours to take back. Is that what you're, or to change? Now, let's say you get discussing it and somebody brings up an idea and you think, well, I wish I'd have thought of that. You have a right to offer an amendment to it. But it's theirs now, and they have to vote on that amendment. You no longer own that motion. It's no longer yours. Did that answer your question, Rachel?
yeah.
Okay.
As long as we pull it back before the chair states the motion,
Yes, yes.
or if the seconder takes back their second before the chair states the motion, we can then rescind our motion.
Yeah.
But once the chair reads it and we've started to discuss and debate it, then no, we can just vote against it if we're against the motion.
That's correct. You've got it. Thank you. So number 4 is the members debate the motion. And I put up there that this is when the motion is considered pending. And I want to explain that word to you because you will find throughout Roberts that the statement will be, when a motion is pending, such and such can happen to it. And so it's important for you to know that it's step number 4. When we're debating it, so if it says in Roberts, when it's pending, you can do such and such, then that is the time that that's what it means by pending, step number 4. Okay? Step number 5 is that the presiding officer puts the motion to a vote, and that should include a restatement of it, or if it's all printed and in front of you, a reference to the title of it, whatever, so that everybody knows what they're voting on. And that is particularly important if there's a couple of amendments going on and that we need to be reminded of what we're voting on at this time is. And then the presiding officer announces the results. And that should include a statement of whether it passed or failed. But first of all, because yours are roll call votes, your first thing would be the number of yeses and the number of noes. And then a declaration of whether that motion passed or failed. Then a brief statement about the effect of that motion and the next business item. So even if somebody's daydreaming, they know what we just did and where we're going. So let's say that we had a motion to amend our rules, and there were 6 in favor, 2 against. The motion, the amendment to the rules has been adopted. We have amended our rules, and the next item of business is ABC. So you see how clear that is. And we all know how easy it is to get distracted, especially back in the audience trying to get your attention and distract you, those kind of things. So that's why the announcement is so important. Okay? Yes, question?
So normally, I feel like maybe we might be a little out of our normal with this, just because we have a tendency, when we have an ordinance read or a resolution or a bid or whatever it is, the city clerk will read what that is, and the city manager will explain what that is, and then we normally go into a discussion of what was just presented. So really, you're saying we should have a motion to move it forward, or whatever that motion might be, and then the discussion?
That's one of the ways that Robert saves time, is that you should have it narrowed down Otherwise, this person will talk about this and that person, and you'll get this, and then the meeting goes on, and you've heard 50 points of view, and you have no focus yet. Make sense? Yeah. Yes.
One or two people should talk it, or all of us as a whole?
Should debate, it should be when we're at step number 4, you mean? Anybody in the group that any of you that are voting members have the right to be speaking during that time. And sometimes enough of people don't speak up. Is that what you're talking about?
What if we're speaking and we're asking questions, and then out of nowhere someone say, I make a motion, I second it, and we're still in a discussion phase?
Well, you can't have, now, this is not my area because I'm talking legal, but you can't bring something up that you haven't given. Open Meetings Act doesn't, I mean.
I think what, like, so it depends on, are we talking about our regular council meeting? Are we talking about an ordinance, let's say, that's at first reading or at second reading? So the rules get a little different depending on what we're at, but I think where it's an item that is, let's say it's on the agenda. Let's say it's an ordinance to approve, an ice cream social. Right?
Okay.
That's the agenda item. Ordinance, ordinance number 123 approves ice cream social there. Usually when the clerk will then read that, the mayor will say, next on the agenda is item number 9. Clerk, can you read this into the record? Item number 9, ordinance to approve ice cream, 123 to approve ice cream social. City manager will then give a overview of what the topic is.
Okay.
There as to, okay, this is what we're looking to do, an ice cream social, it'll be on this date for this dollar amount, not to exceed this amount of expenditure. Are there any questions there? A lot of times then it will move into, motion to approve ordinance number 123, second, further discussion there, and then people will start debating, have that discussion on that topic. I think where Alderman Stacy was going is once the motion is made and seconded there and there's discussion, at what point can it be cut off? I think where the mayor was getting to sometimes where we take things a little out of order just by practice is that when the city manager gives his report sometimes, which is before an initial motion and second is made, there might be some questions asked, and I think
There's nothing
basically-
wrong with that.
Okay, I think
You are setting the boundaries, you're setting it up so that they can make better discussion and better questions.
right.
And you're doing that before you're actually opening it up for debate.
Sure.
And that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
it's
where
great to give as much information as you believe they need beforehand, and then somebody makes the motion, and then we get into debate about it.
further debate, right? So I think that's where Alderman Stacy was
Yes.
going. Was
Yeah.
there could be some questions being asked of the city manager prior to a motion being made. Someone could then say, I make a motion, there could be a second, but nonetheless, there should still be then step 4 occurring.
Yes.
After the motion and second is made, there should still be any further
She should
debate.
then restate it,
Yeah.
and then it goes to discussion, and then we go from there, yes.
Got it.
There's nothing wrong with giving information before you get into. What you don't want, though, is the city manager has told us about the ice cream social, and then I, as an older person, say something to the city manager about why I think it's not a good idea, and I don't think we should. That's debating it, and we don't have a motion on the floor yet. You see the difference? Yeah, I mean, does that help make it clearer? Not for you, because I know it was clear for you to start with, but for the rest of you. So, yes.
What I was saying was, if we're seeking information, if we still have unanswered questions, and then someone make a motion and someone hurry and second it, then it's irrelevant to go on with our concerns and our questions, because maybe after I got this question answered, maybe I was going to make a motion to put it on the back burner till next meeting.
Okay, let's go through that. When you are at step number 4, where we're debating it, so somebody talked about it, then the motion was made, seconded, we're debating it, the chair restated it, and we're debating it, and you're hearing the debate, and you're thinking, we shouldn't be doing this, we need some more information.
Yes.
You raise your hand, and I'll show it to you later, but you raise your hand, and you get recognition from the chair, and you move to postpone this to the next meeting.
So you can have 2 motions on the floor at the same time?
We're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. I got some bad news for you. You can have a lot of motions on the floor at the same time, but we'll talk about that. So it can't be, the motions have to have something to do with the main motion if they're happening during that step number 4 of the main motion. But I'm going to give you some, I think I'll help clarify that in a few minutes. I hope. If I don't, you let me know, okay? And that's where we're going now, is to a concept called precedence of motions. And what the concept does or has is that these 14 motions that you see listed up there, these 14 motions are the only motions that are involved in precedence of motions. And if you look on page 9 in your handout, at the bottom there, you're going to see a ladder. And you're going to see it going next to certain motions. These 14 motions, here's the principle. When any one of these motions are on the floor, anything above it in this list is in order. Anything below it on this list is out of order, and it's truly that simple. Anything above it on the list is in order. Anything below it on the list is out of order. So follow with me with that ladder, and I'm going to use an example. Someone moves that we purchase a computer, and it's seconded, and it's restated by the chair. And then we start discussing it. And now I know that this doesn't apply to you because yours all you have to tell how much it'll cost and all those kind of things. But let's say you didn't have to do that, okay? The motion is made, I move that we purchase a computer. And somebody thinks, this group spends too much money on stuff. I move to amend the motion by adding the words not to exceed $2,000. Can I do that? The blue one is a main motion. The red one, again, be on page 9 with that ladder. The red one is a primary amendment. It's above it on the list, so it's in order. Make sense? Okay, now, the motion that's immediately pending is now the $2,000 one, not the amendment. And that's been seconded, restated by the chair. You're discussing the 2,000, and one of the members seeks recognition and says, 2,000? When was the last time you bought the kind of computer we're going to need? We need to at least have it at 4,000. So I move to amend the amendment by striking 2,000 and inserting 4,000. Can you do that? What number on your list is the red one, not to exceed 2,000? On that ladder in front of you. 12. Number 12. What number is a secondary amendment, which is to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000?
11.
11. It's above it on the list. It's okay. We can do it. Let's say we're discussing that, and someone says, your motion that you mentioned a few minutes ago, I move that we postpone this to the next meeting. Is that allowed? Remember that the green one up there is a number 11, a secondary motion, a secondary amendment, I'm sorry. And postpone to the next meeting is what number on the list? 13. Number 9, postpone definitely. So it's above it on the list. You would accept that motion, and you would look for a second. You would restate that the motion we're now voting on or discussing is to postpone to the next meeting. You have discussion, and then you take a vote. If you get a yes vote, you have not gotten rid of that main motion, that primary amendment, and the secondary amendment. You take that whole package and you put it on the agenda for the next meeting in that same order. So at the next meeting, you would start with strike 2,000 and insert 4,000, and then go on down. But we'll get to that in a minute.
And that's only if that motion to postpone definitely passes.
That's correct.
And if it does not pass, does it go back to number 11?
Yes, strike 2,000 and insert 4,000. Thus the ladder. So it didn't pass, so you don't go, you come back down. Now, we've got 4 motions on the floor. We have to decide, well, you have to decide, but we have to know what we vote on and in what order, and it's incredibly logical. Once you study it and get to know it, not at first glance. I didn't mean that to sound like it was logical at first glance, but there's lots of good reasons. First of all, we take a vote on postpone definitely, because that's the one that was at the top of the ladder. So we went up the ladder. We're going to come back down one rung at a time. And of course, there is an exception to that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we're at postpone definitely. If you got a yes vote on postpone definitely, then you are finished talking about the purchase of the computer for this meeting. And you take those 3 other motions, the main motion, the primary amendment, and the secondary amendment, and you put them on the agenda for the next meeting. And then you do what we're going to do now. But let's say postpone definitely failed. Then what do we vote on? The secondary amendment. We come back down one rung at a time. And the secondary amendment was to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000. We discuss that, and then we take a vote on it. If we get a yes vote, then what are we going to vote on? We have to vote on the primary amendment. We have not yet decided if we want to put a price limit on it. All we've decided so far is that if we put a price limit, it's going to be 4,000. Okay? Make sense? So then we go to the primary amendment, which is now reads to add the words not to exceed $4,000. We discuss it. We vote on it. Let's say we get a yes vote. Then what do we vote on? Got it. The main motion as amended. So now what we're going to vote on is that we purchase a computer not to exceed $4,000. Does that make sense? And then if we get a yes vote on that main motion, we have taken one action. And that action is to authorize the purchase of a computer not to exceed $4,000. Do I have you with me? Does it make sense? Have that little ladder guy near. Yeah, it's helpful. Any questions about the proceedings of motions? Yes.
Could you explain the difference between postpone and table? Or were you
Yes, and
doing it-
then if you don't mind, I'll also throw in postpone indefinitely.
Okay.
Okay. Postpone to the next meeting, postpone definitely is meant that you are picking up the package and you're putting it on the agenda at that next meeting. You haven't decided anything except not to kill the idea yet. You haven't decided to kill it, that's the only thing you've decided. You're going to at least think about it for the next meeting. To table it, a motion to lay on the table, which is much higher, is one of the most overused and abused of all of the motions. And the motion to lay on the table simply means you are going to put it aside until, and in this meeting, until a later time when you take it from the table. Let's say that you're in a city council meeting and you're in the middle of discussing something, and in walks the governor, and he comes. You don't want to continue. You probably want to stop and say hi and do all those honor things, right? So you would then, somebody would move to lay the motion on the table. And then when the mayor leaves, you could move to bring it from the table. But it doesn't stay on the table for life, okay? The other one I want to explain is postpone indefinitely. This can be a lifesaver. And here's why I say that. It allows you to kill a motion without taking a vote. So somebody makes a motion that you don't want to pass, but if you all vote no on it, then it's not what you want. You think it's a horrible idea. So you're in that quandary of, we don't want it to pass, but we don't want to vote no because they'll say we're not very nice people, or whatever they might say. Then you can move to postpone indefinitely. And what does postpone indefinitely mean? In essence, you're killing the motion. It is a way to kill a motion, and then it doesn't come back up. It can't come back up for the remainder of this meeting. But if something happens between this meeting and the next meeting, and you change your mind and you think it's a great idea, you can bring it back up. But it kills it for the remainder of this meeting. Yes?
Who can bring it back up?
Anyone can. When it's postponed indefinitely, it is as if the motion is, we're done with it. It's over. So you would have to bring it back up as a new motion. So you would have to do all the things you would have to do to bring a new motion to the next meeting. Question?
No vote taken on that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There wasn't.
Oh, no, there's a vote. No, there's a vote on all of them. Yeah. But remember I said there was one exception to the rule of the ladder? That's the exception. If you get a yes on postpone indefinitely, remember the purpose is to kill it. You just killed it so you don't come back down and vote on the main motion. If you got a no on it, you do. But if you've got a yes on it, you don't come back down the ladder because you already voted to kill it. Does that make sense? Question?
I see it's, in order, it's number 13, so you can't postpone indefinitely after you get too far into the rhubarb then, after you're making amendments and whatnot.
Well, you can if you get back down.
If some-
Eventually,
okay.
you know, if you've gone up the ladder, you're going to get back down, and maybe by the time you get back down to the main motion as it was amended, you want to kill that puppy. So yeah, you can't while you've got an amendment on the floor, but if it passes, and then you want to get rid of it, yeah.
And that's just being killed at that meeting.
Correct. Yes. Can't kill it forever. You may like to, but you can't. Okay, any questions on precedence of motions? Does it make sense? Okay. Let's then talk about, oops. I didn't show you this. Okay. So this is just a reminder of you have the motion, postpone to the next, you've got, I move we purchase a computer not to exceed 2,000, strike 2,000, insert 4,000, postpone, we vote, I'm sorry, we vote on postpone and it failed, then we go to strike 2,000 and insert 4,000, then if that passes, we go to not to exceed 4,000, and then if that passes, our final vote in this motion would be whether or not we want to purchase a computer not to exceed 4,000. So just a little reminder of that.
And if it does not pass, then we're still back at 2,000.
If the motion,
To take it to 4,000 does
okay,
not pass.
go back up to, let me go back up to where it, sorry. So we vote on strike 2,000, 4,000, 2,000 and insert 4,000. If we get a no vote on strike 2,000 and insert 4,000, then we're back at 2,000. If we get a yes vote on it, then the next one we vote on is the 4,000. You're right, yes. Any other questions on the precedence of motions? Let's talk about the meaning of votes. There's a majority vote is more than half. Don't do half plus one, because it only works half the time. So it's more than half of the votes cast. A 2/3 vote, the best way to do it is when the vote is done, multiply the number of no votes by 2. And that's how many yes votes you needed. So if you had 3 no votes, you would have had to have had 6 yes votes for it to pass, for a 2/3 vote. A plurality is one you probably don't see in here, but it's one that my guess is, got most of you where you are. Because when we vote in elections in this country, it's a plurality vote. Whoever gets the most votes wins. It's not a majority vote when we do, otherwise we'd still be voting on Bush and Gore if the whole country had to by majority vote. And some of you are younger and may not know what I'm talking about, but okay. Sorry. Okay, then abstain, it simply means I'm choosing to refrain from voting. But remember, since you are an elected official, you are here to represent the body that you represent, you should be very careful about abstaining. You should be only using that whenever you have a conflict of interest or something like that. Okay?
So, you know, in past experience, you know, I'll just use Alderman Parker as an example. When we talk about.
He seems to be the one everybody
Yeah,
likes
I
to pick
think
on.
that he's a good target. He'll abstain when we're talking about maybe something to do with retirement, anything that type of stuff, because it affects him. So he abstains.
Perfect.
So does
Perfect.
that mean that if he knows that he's going to abstain, chooses to abstain, should he also abstain from discussion? Should he eliminate himself from the discussion portion?
Roberts doesn't say that he has to, but because there might be some information, I think you need to be careful. But you can give information, because many times you're the only one in the room that knows that because you are involved. And so giving information, but Roberts does not say he has to abstain from voting, from discussion if he chooses to abstain from voting. No. Okay. Yes.
Okay. We've had discussion on putting a cap on vending machines or gaming machines.
Okay.
And I could care less one way or the other. It don't interest me. I don't play it. I don't game. And so when we took a vote one time, I abstained. Was that? Because I really could care less. one
Okay,
way.
but remember, you're here representing the people who elected you. Not the people who elected you, the people in your district. And if you don't care, but you know that a majority of the people in your district are in favor of them or against it, then you should be voting as to what they would like you to vote on.
And what if we don't know because we haven't searched that information out?
Which is one of the reasons why there is advance notice, the Open Meetings Act, because you get information in advance and then you can do some research. But I'm not saying you can't abstain. I'm simply saying that you're here to represent them, and when you abstain, you're not using their vote. And that's how they may feel about it.
Well, when you say you get the information in advance, those of us that have jobs, you know, I work at a school district. And so when I get the agenda on Friday, there's no time to even ask questions or search out information. But then the 48 hours is Saturday and Sunday when no one is working. And then the meeting is Monday. So what does one do?
It's your constituency that you would be asking about, and you might call some of the leaders in your area, people who you know are kind of in the know about certain subjects, and just get them to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And have them educate you. As a matter of fact, when you said that, my first thought was, boy, that gives you even more time to be able to do that, because you do have the time, some time over the weekend, not all 24 hours every day, but you have maybe some time over the weekend to do some of that kind of research, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I'm not saying ask everybody that, I'm just do as much as you can to find out what the point of view of your constituents are, because that's who you're voting for. Make sense? Okay. Any other questions on meaning of vote? Let's then talk about when the presiding officer votes. Now, the attorney will tell you that there are some very specific things in the state statute which tells you when the presiding officer can vote. But what I'm going to share with you is, again, that thing of a club or a church group or whatever, because now all of a sudden they're going to think you're the expert. So I'm going to tell you what would be not according to the state statutes, but what would be the presiding officer votes. And then maybe the attorney would like to talk about that for us for a minute, if you would, please. The presiding officer, if they're a member of the body that's meeting, votes, and of course this doesn't apply to you because you never vote by ballot because of the Open Meetings Act. But if it's like your church group or whatever, the presiding officer, if it's a ballot vote, votes right along with everybody else. Because remember, we don't know how people voted with the ballot vote, so we won't know how the chair voted. If it's a roll call vote, the chair's name is, the presiding officer's name is called last. And then only votes if their vote will affect the results. So if you make a majority, or you keep it from a majority, or you make a 2/3, or you prevent a 2/3, either way, that person votes if their vote affects the results. Okay. In your handout, you'll find, and let me, there, page 11. I put that in there because a lot of you, my guess are or will be leader of committees or of other organizations. And what I have for you there is a script for how the words that you use when you process a motion. So it gives you how to go through that. And if you go to conventions, understand that in most cases, if there's a parliamentarian involved, that presiding officer has a full script for everything they say during the meeting, because they make sure that they're prepared. So there's nothing wrong with you as a presiding officer anytime using a script. Another thing that I have in here is about a 3-page handout on meeting minutes. It tells you what should be contained in the minutes, what should not be included in the minutes, how the minutes are distributed, the attachment, the approval, the signature, what to do with the minutes book, and copies. So if you have a friend of yours who comes to you and says, "You're on city council, secretary of my blank blank club. I don't even know how to do minutes." Your answer is, "Oh, let me make a copy of these 3 pages for you. It'll tell you everything, what should be in there and what shouldn't." So you can be the answer person on that particular one. Before we go to the next subject, I'd like to go back to what I mentioned. I was going to ask the mayor to talk about when the presiding officer votes, when the mayor votes.
Sure. So under state statute and our city code of ordinances, there's generally speaking 3 situations where the mayor will be allowed to vote. One of them is when the vote of the council has resulted in a tie. So in our case, a 4-4 tie, then the mayor would be asked to cast the deciding vote on that. The other situation, the second situation, is when there is a supermajority vote that's required, more than majority, 2/3, 3/4 sometimes, depending on what the scenario is. Then typically the mayor's vote would be called for as the last vote there to see if they create that supermajority or prevent the supermajority, as Nancy had mentioned. The third situation per state statute is if a vote of the council, where if half of the vote of the council has voted in favor of a motion, then the mayor can be called to cast their vote on it. So in our case, if our council is 8, so half of 8 is 4. If 4 members of the council have voted in favor of a motion, the mayor can cast their vote, in our situation, then to make the 5th vote that would be needed to approve a lot of items. there. So those are the situations. There's extraneous circumstances where a specific statute, a very specific statute will say, and in order to do this thing, I'm just going to make this up. This is probably not even necessarily true, but like if you want to pass this bond or approve this bond, the bond has to be a majority of vote of the corporate authorities. It uses the term corporate authorities instead of the city council. Well, corporate authorities is defined to mean the city council plus the mayor. So at that point, the vote, if that specific statute uses the term a majority of the corporate authorities, then that includes the mayor, and the mayor's vote should be called in that scenario as well. But it's primarily the three situations, because those apply generally to all situations. That last one I talked about was only if the specific statute uses the term corporate authorities.
Okay. Thank you for that. There are some procedures for small boards, and small boards are defined by Roberts as 12 or less. And if you use those, you have to adopt them. You have to, as a body, agree by majority vote to adopt them. Here are some of those rules. You do not need to, you can raise your hand when seeking recognition instead of stand, but you all already have that, so that's already taken care of. Motions do not need a second. Robert says if it's a small group that you don't have some of the same stipulations that a large group has on them, and that would be one of them. There's no limit on the number of times a person may speak in debate in small boards. And informal discussion is allowed without a motion. When a proposal is perfectly clear, and I put that in quote marks because you'll find that in Roberts, and he goes into this long paragraph, which you have to really read the whole paragraph before you actually make a judgment on that one. And the presiding officer stays seated during the meeting, which is what I'm assuming you do during the city council meetings. And the presiding officer can participate. So those are rules for a small board, but if you some of them you already have. Others, if you decide you want them, you would have to vote to have them there. And they would have to not be in conflict with state statute. But just wanted to tell you about those rules as well. The next thing I want to mention to you is if you go to the last 2 pages of your handout. And what you'll find there is a table, and this is what I do with mine. I have it back to back and laminated, and I keep it keep it in front of me, because under a lot of pressure in a meeting, sometimes your brain goes blank. And you can just remember 2/3, it doesn't need a majority, it did whatever. What this is if you go to the first page of the 2, you will notice that there are 14 motions on that page, and they are numbered. That's your precedence of motions. They are numbered, they are in the order of precedence of motions. If you go to the next page, there is no order to them. There is no specific order to them. For each of these motions, it tells you the purpose, whether or not it can interrupt a speaker, if a second is needed, if it's debatable, if it's amendable, and what vote is needed. So it's a nice little cheat sheet if you have it in front of you during a meeting. We've looked at the purposes of parliamentary procedure, of quorum, at agenda, at the order of business, the processing of motion, precedence of motions, the meaning of votes. We've looked at script of a motion and basic characteristics of a motion. So we've talked about boardsmanship, and we've talked about parliamentary procedure. There are some additional resources at my website, which is my name, and they're all free. And Now it's time for any questions that you may have. Any questions? Don, do you?
No,
Oh, it looked like you did, I'm sorry. Any questions that we haven't had a chance to answer? Yes,
One thing I didn't hear you mention, and I've just seen it used in the past, when a motion has been debated for a fair amount of time, for somebody asking to call a question.
okay. If you'll go to that, just stay on the page where you're on, that, the first of the 2 pages of that basic characteristics, where I've got the precedence of motions numbered, 1 through 14. Number 7 is previous question. That is the move to call the question. Call the question is slang for previous question. Previous question ends debate and moves directly to the vote. Notice, if you go all the way to the end of that line, it takes a 2/3 vote because you're taking away from your fellow members the right to discuss it again, continue discussing it. So therefore, because you're taking away rights, it needs a 2/3 vote. When you're giving rights, majority vote, but once you take them, when you're taking them away, if you think about it, it's very logical, it needs a 2/3 vote. So there's the precedence, and there's where that fits in, of where you can make it and how you can make that.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
question here?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that. You cannot shut off debate unless we vote and it is voted 2/3 in favor of.
That's correct. A motion is made unless there's nobody wanting to debate, or unless you have a rule, or unless you've all agreed to a time limit. Because then you've already agreed to, you've already in essence agreed to a new rule. But when we're debating, if you seek recognition, you get called on, you move the previous question, everything stops. The previous question motion need a second. And the good news is that, notice under debatable, it's not debatable, so we do have a chance of stopping debate. And then you immediately go to a vote, and it takes 2/3 of you, so 2 times the number of no votes, you have to have that many yes votes. And that stops debate. Yes. Is there something in the statutes that say anything different?
Not that I'm aware
Okay.
of, no.
I didn't think
Not as
there
far-
was, but I just wanted to check.
Tom?
Any other? Yes.
Did I do one more?
You can do whatever you'd like.
Thank you. I appreciate your help. Could you explain, because it's always explained by different people different ways, tell me how an abstention counts when it comes to voting. Does it go to the winning side? Does it go to, how does that work?
It doesn't go anywhere.
It just dies. So that's
Now, sometimes an abstention, like if you needed a majority of the votes of the members present and voting, and someone abstains, it in essence has a negative effect on the vote.
okay.
But it doesn't count either way. It is your way of saying, I'm out of this one, I'm not going to vote. And a big part of why it's used is when you have a conflict of interest, or even a perceived conflict of interest. You have a child or an adult child who owns a construction business, and they've already indicated that they're going to go bidding on this one if it goes, or that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing when you need to abstain.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just going to give another example to kind of piggyback off of your your comments, Nancy. So for example, let's say you needed actual, like 4 affirmative votes to pass an item.
Yes.
And that's like a ZBA thing, right? So if you needed 4 affirmative votes, well, if you have 3 yes votes so far, you know, the other remaining ones are no's, and the last person to vote abstains, well, you only ended up with 3 votes. So how did they didn't vote no, but their abstention basically had the same effect as a no vote because they didn't create that 4th yes that was absolutely needed.
And
So
it's
that's-
not just that person. If any of the other 3
Correct.
after the first 4 votes are yes, first 3
Three.
votes are yes, and maybe one of the next 4 votes is a no, and the rest of them are all abstentions, you've
Right.
done, yeah.
Right.
You know, then the blame or credit is spread amongst all of them.
Right. But the abstention is basically has the practical effect
Yes.
of a no because it didn't create
you.
the 4th yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
If you abstain, you don't have to explain why you're abstaining?
No, you don't.
All right, thank you.
There's nothing in, right, there's nothing in Roberts that says you have to explain. You know, whether there's something in another rule or in statutes, that's different. But Roberts says that you didn't know. That is your choice.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just that I'm saying to you that just be careful not to overuse abstain, because pretty soon your constituency begins wondering,
Why?
yeah, do I have a representative there? Yeah, yes.
You know, often you have used the word debate. What's the difference between debating and fact-finding?
Usually, fact-finding is during the debate time, and it counts as a part of that time. And you can do some fact-finding like we talked about earlier when you come in and Rob comes in and gives a bunch of information beforehand. And you ask questions of him, not pro-con kinds of questions, but fact-finding questions. But if it's done during the debate time, it's a part of the debate time. But it can be done, and I encourage you to do it. If you can give as much information as you can, given in a way that is neutral to the body before they ever even start discussing it, that's a wonderful thing to do. Because then we've increased the chances of them making an educated decision.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome. Thank you all. And keep doing what you're doing, because your community needs volunteers who are willing to spend the kind of time that you have chosen to spend on this job. And it's an important job for the community. So keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Very important.
Very informative. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, number 10, quarterly update on the city's goals established by Social Justice Committee. City Manager Boyer.
Thank you, Alderman Parker. The Social Justice Committee recommended a number of metrics to be used to see how the city is making progress for diversity, equity, and inclusion in city government. With respect to hiring, in the second quarter of 2023, we will continue to recruit for open positions in all departments. The library is fully staffed following Q1. The police department is down 11 officers and 2 dispatchers. The fire department has 2 firefighter openings. In the police department, the female workforce accounts for 38.9% of the department's employees, and the minority workforce accounts for 11.8%. Both numbers are up slightly from the 2023 first quarter. In the fire department, we saw a slight reduction in female minority employment. Female employees account for 6.8% of the fire department workforce. a reduction of 2% based on first quarter, and minority employees account for 0% of the workforce. We have 2 vacancies. Our goal in both departments is to increase female minority employment by 5% by the end of the year. We have used various outreach techniques and resources to recruit applicants for these positions, including community leaders and clergy, TV, radio, and ads in minority publications and professional associations. We are also using targeted Facebook ads. With respect to the other departments, the number of female employees decreased by 2 from the first quarter. Overall female employment in non-police and non-fire departments make up 39.4% of the workforce. The non-public safety minority workforce has 7.9% of the employees. Overall, we have 56 female employees and 13 minority employees, and a total workforce of 179. This equates to female employees making up 31.2% of our workforce and minority employees making up 7.2%. Looking at our last quarter ending March 31st, 2023, we saw the following changes, and there's a table for your review. In the police department, we gained 3 female positions compared with last quarter and 1 compared with our December 31, 2022 base. In the fire department, there was no change in female employment from last quarter and no change compared with our 2022 base. In all other departments, our female employment was down 2 positions from last quarter. However, it was up 1 position as compared with the 2022 base. With our minority recruitments, police minority employees was up 1 position compared with last quarter and stayed even compared with our December 31, 2022 base. There was no change in the fire department compared with the first quarter of 2023 or the 2022 base. We did not conduct any staff on the street activities in the second quarter. However, staff at the time was planning and has recently engaged in community engagement activities, notably the Tuddy Baker Festival and also the Stevenson County Fair, and other charitable gatherings to optimize engagement opportunities. The first activity will be, well, the one we just completed at Tuddy Baker, July 7th through the 9th. I'm sorry, yes. Our goal for nuisance and building inspections was to increase them by 5% from the previous year. Since we did so well in 2022, we set a new goal of 9%. Our new base is now 6,100 inspections for the year. Community development accomplished 1,965 inspections, an increase of over 25% compared to last quarter. During this quarter, we had a total of 9 building demolitions. That's 7 houses and 2 accessory buildings. Although we had several changes on our boards and commissions, the female and minority membership on our committees did not change from the first quarter of 2023, and both are significantly down from the 2022 base year. That completes my report.
Any questions? Okay, next is number 11, public comments. Non-agenda, Dovey's got 2 letters to read, and then we have...
I'll start with the first that came in this afternoon. One this morning from Eric Quick. I was appalled at Alderman Monroe's public comment at the July 3rd City Council meeting. I'm not the only one who feels the same way. It demonstrated a lack of professionalism and poor emotional restraint from an elected official who ran for the seat fully aware of the broad makeup of Freeport's community. In his response, Alderman Monroe essentially played the "if you don't like it, go back where you came from" card. It's not a good look, Alderman. There is a healthy number of transplants in this city, many of whom have ties to Chicago, which you so flippantly maligned. Many of these transplants spend good money in this city and pay a fair chunk of taxes. Imagine how much deeper the struggle would be for Freeport if that money suddenly vanished. Perhaps Alderman Monroe is unaware that there is a petition currently circulating calling for him to step down from his seat. It might be wise for Alderman Monroe to reconsider his tone when addressing community members in the future before the community rises up to the call for his early removal. Signed, Eric Quick, Freeport citizen, and I'm sorry, that came in last week, actually. Today's is from Shane Orlo, 6th Ward, Freeport, not from Chicago. Public comment is established in a local government institution to give the people of the city a voice in the process that council persons are either about to take or will be taking during their meetings. It is established so that decisions are made with the consideration of ideas from all citizens of the city. Last week, I made a comment to advocate that the council consider the east side of the city when they approach the time to make a decision about which roads they are going to work on next. This comment shouldn't have even made a dent in the egos of the city council members. Yet one council member took offense, claiming that my comment was referencing race. My comment mentioned demographics. The definition of demographics from Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the statistical characteristics of human populations, such as age or income, used specifically to identify markets. You'll notice race is not a part of that definition. Maybe the writing is on the wall and it is about race for this council member, but my comment was in direct observation of the economic divide that is quite visible when you cross West Avenue. My comment was to simply advocate for the people and for improvements on the east side of town. Either way, the city council member continued to berate myself and the people of the city by stating, "We've got transplants from Chicago coming here and telling us how to run our city. They can't get it right there. So stay out of our business, stay out of our politics. Go back there if you love it so much." As an almost 15-year resident of Freeport, not Dakota or somewhere else in Stevenson County, but Freeport, my voice should be considered just as much as any other person that lives here. Yes, I may be a transplant from another area in northern Illinois, but I have chosen Freeport to be the place where I established a career, a home, and a family. Freeport is the city that I chose to stay in, that I choose to stay in, and you will hear from me about other local politics since it is my right as a citizen of this city. This city council member holds the archaic mentality of, if you don't like it, leave. Welp, the people have spoken and they are leaving. It is because the voice of the people is shot down by ignorant comments that come from our elected leaders that are supposed to listen during public comment, not attack and offend the people. This council member claimed to want to bring us all together to get things done. If that is the case, he wouldn't discredit much of the Freeport population that transplants here to establish a job, home, and family. Many feel the opposite is the case, Mr. Monroe. Maybe it is time that you step down from your position and let the transplants that want to see progress, revitalization, and sustainability for Freeport take the lead.
Your 3 minutes is exceeded.
Okay, next is Diane Yocum. Please state your name, please. You get 3 minutes, so. There you go.
My name is Diane Yocum, and I'm a member of the First Ward of this city. And I'm reading these comments on behalf of Mrs. Cecilia Stacy, Fifth Ward Alderwoman. Since winning the Fifth Ward Alderman seat, I have been lied to, disrespected, and laughed at. These
Ma'am.
atrocious behaviors
Excuse me,
were
ma'am.
dealt to
You're reading this on behalf of Ms. Stacy?
Stacy.
Alderman Stacy, I mean, if these are your comments, you should really be making them yourselves.
So you're saying she can't read that?
She's reading them on your behalf and you're here. It would make
Okay,
most
so
sense for
want
you.
me to leave so she can read it?
I'm not
I'll
asking
leave.
you to leave. I'm just saying if you,
I'll
it'd be
leave.
probably most appropriate for you to make your comments yourself.
I'll leave so you can read it.
You want to read them?
No, you go ahead.
Is the clock still ticking on my comments? Okay. I'll begin again. Since winning the 5th Ward Alderman seat, I have been lied to, disrespected, and laughed at. These atrocious behaviors were dealt to me by the current administration and fellow seasoned council members, all because I am holding to my commitment to my constituents. Those commitments include making pinpointed questions, ascertaining the truth, and being a catalyst of positive change for the 5th Ward and all citizens of Freeport. I've taken this all in stride while maintaining my dignity, integrity, and unwavering faith. Being lied to, disrespected, and laughed at is bad, but not bad enough for this administration. No, they must take things a step further by insinuating that the new council members are ignorant and therefore must be trained. This insulting of our intelligence has been constantly at work since we took our seats as council members. Snide comments like, "Let me help you understand," or "Apparently you don't understand how things work," have not gone unnoticed. But tonight's training only further indicates your apparent
Madam Mayor.
lack of respect for us.
Quick question. Do we still have a quorum?
Nobody's voting on this.
We're not voting, but
This-
you interrupted her.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. I didn't want to violate the law. Sorry.
When speaking to City Manager Boyer on 7/6/2023, he tried to convince me that this training is for the entire council, not just for the new members, claiming that the more seasoned council members could use refreshing. If this training was so necessary, why wasn't it conducted during our new member orientation? City Manager Boyer also stated that he had been planning this training for months, but he was so busy that he forgot to mention this training to the council. Hogwash. This administration would like the people to think they are working with new council members, but that's not true. The truth is that this administration has never accepted the new members. Even during our 2-day orientation, Mayor Miller refused even to speak with us. When I asked if Mayor Miller was joining us, City Manager Boyer told us she does not handle confrontation well and would not attend. I responded, "Is this confrontation,
Your
really?"
3 minutes has exceeded.
Okay.
Any other public comments? Step up here. Thank you.
I'm Linda Johnson. Mayor Miller, City Manager Boyer, council members, and fellow citizens. I would like to thank the council and leaders in the community for your service and countless hours that are spent in research, reading, writing reports, applying for grants, making decisions, preparing reports, and implementing processes to govern the affairs of this city. It is a daunting task to deal with the expenses of this city's needs and prioritizing those needs, especially when an unexpected need arises. As was mentioned at a previous meeting, many people on fixed incomes are having difficulties with fulfilling all of their medical and physical needs, and specifically paying increases in water bills. I empathize, as I am too, on a fixed income. Inflation has hit and costs have increased greatly since COVID. Garbage pickup costs increase. Regulations for water and sewer and old wells and pipes call for more funding. Those who do not pay their water bills put a burden on the rest of the population. None of us like the increase in water bills, including those who made the decision to increase them. I heard the heart of some of the council members. We just want to ease the burden of the people and do what we can to help them. I'm in total agreement with that. How do we as a council members and this community, all of us, do that? What is the strategy? It can't be done by pointing fingers, carrying animosity in your heart, ruminating over past decisions that cause problems and mistrust. It can't be about having separate agendas. It's not about Democrat or Republican, because they both have their shortcomings. It is not about young or old, rich or poor, male or female, or ethnicity. It is about people, those elected here caring for those they serve. It is about shifting the city into all that God intended it to be. It is about faith, hope, love, and unity. It's working together to find ways to fund needs without increasing tax burdens. It is seizing the moment when funds are offered from outside entities to care for an issue. If the moment is not seized, then the grants are gone and disappear, and the people here are left to pay the entire bill. It is placing qualified people in positions as the opportunity arises or as they apply. It is working together on budgets and understanding the duties of each paid leader in the city to determine workloads and needs. I agree that many roads have been bad, potholes, and the cost to repair them is astronomical. I would ask that what I can do, what can I do as a citizen to help get rid of some of these potholes? I am willing to help, and I'm sure others would be too. I agree housing is an issue. Poor landlords who take advantage of people and do not provide safe housing that meets basic needs. And on the flip side, those who rent housing and do not pay rent or trash the housing. How can we as citizens help in these matters? There was mention of the people not having a voice. Some ways to have a voice are to read the agendas ahead of time, educate yourselves on the matter at hand, attend the meetings, give public comments at the appointed times, talk with your aldermen as they represent you, contact specific departments with specific needs. We cannot change what happened yesterday, but we can start today to make a better tomorrow. Nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending. Again, thank you to all who serve. Forgive past mistakes, work together, communicate with each other, pray, and seek the good for the people in this city. May the Lord be with us all. Amen.
Any more public comments? Step up there, 3 minutes.
Hi, Ed Klein, live over on Lily Creek Road. What I would like to ask, first of all, I want to thank Nancy Sylvester for that. It's amazing presentation. What I wanted to bring up during the presentation was on the hourglass explanation. I don't believe it was meant that everything needs to go through the mayor if there's information needed, because certainly Mr. Boyer is the expert on in this city. So I've asked Nancy to please explain that a little bit so that is not confusing.
Get 3 more minutes, or is she? Okay.
Is she under public comment, though?
On the agenda.
I'm not a citizen, so I don't know if I get.
Okay. Is she public comment? Is she under the agenda, or is she without?
I think this is a follow-up. I think Nancy can answer the question there again. But again, this is, public comment is not meant for debate. You know, it's not a time to there, but
You're not debating.
I just needed it clear.
If it's information.
She was asking, like,
He asked about if it's information, can you go directly? I would encourage people, though, to be very careful about that, because so many times, I'm going to go ask you for I picked on you earlier, let's do it now. I'm going to go to you and ask you some questions, and pretty soon, I'm giving you the opinion of what I think, as an alderman, you ought to be doing. And then I may even, say, you've got to do that in order to do your job right. I don't know how you can do your job if you do. That's not questioning anymore. So I think that it's dangerous to do that if there's some specific information. If it were me, I would put it in writing and ask for that information at a meeting or whatever. But just, if you can stay at just, I want to know, what are your plans for next year? Have you thought about what we're going to be doing within, I know you have. What have you thought about we're going to be doing in the next 2 years? And if it stays at that, but what about if you don't, why are you doing that? Now I've gone beyond it. So that's the issue with asking them questions.
Thank you. Oh, Mayor? She waved like she wanted something.
setting a timer again?
Start whenever you want to go.
I don't know.
I'd just like to defend myself on a few of those public comments that were read. The statement that I refuse to speak with the new alderman, I just want to give 2 examples that that's not true. The very week that the new aldermen received their votes in April, I sent a message, email to each one of the aldermen, and I welcomed them to the new council. I congratulated them on their votes, and I said that my door is always open if you'd like to talk to me. I got no response from Alderman Stacy. Another example is I was surprised.
Point of order, Mayor.
Well,
thought public
I don't have
comment
my
was
3
not-
minutes yet.
For,
So I was surprised
hang on.
that there were so many no votes
Q&A.
on
Get through 3
simple
minutes.
things of the Planning Commission. So I reached out to each one of those that cast the no votes, and I just said, I would really like to have an understanding of why you voted no. Please help me understand that. Alderman Stacy did not respond to me. So I just wanted to make that clear, that I am not unreachable. My door is open, my phone is on, and I welcome that. So, and as far as the comment about the 2-day orientation, the mayor has never attended the 2-day orientation. It is not because I didn't want to. It's just a part of how we proceed. Thank you.
so I'm sorry. We can get up and respond to public comments now? That's what we do?
She asks, members of the council can, if they want to make a public comment, you can come off the dais and make a comment pursuant to the same rules that any person wants to make a public comment to.
Don't tell me that. Okay, no, I do not
Okay.
have a public comment at this
All right,
time.
any more public comments? If not, need a motion to adjourn? So moved. By Monroe, seconded by,
Oh, to get out of here? Second.
got a second here. Okay, by Simmons. Got your name right this time. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?